Hi, this is Paul. I wanted to do a bit of a video on Thursday at Synod. Thursday was a huge day, and the events of Thursday are reverberating around the denomination in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different corners. I've been talking to some of the synodical delegates who are going home. I'll be having some phone calls with some. I'll probably have some on the channel. It's obviously different being there than it is watching on YouTube. There are many, many, many different opinions as to what happened. There are rumors. It's kind of a mess. I described it Thursday on Twitter as if Wednesday felt like a funeral, Thursday feels like when a fight breaks out at a funeral. And as a pastor, that happens sometimes. Dramatic things happen at funerals. Families fight at funerals. And in some ways, if Wednesday was a funeral, Thursday was the fight after the funeral. Now, the way Thursday was supposed to go in terms of the way the agenda was laid out by the officers was this way. Wednesday, there was Advisory Committee 7 that basically dealt with issues of human sexuality. And the main question of all of the overtures was the question, will the Human Sexuality Report of Synod 2022 that maintained the traditional position on human sexuality and same-sex marriage, will that be maintained by the denomination as well as the confessionality stand, that the declaration that this is the confessional position of the Christian Reformed Church? And that's the element that actually has a degree of bite on the office bearers of the Christian Reformed Church. And again and again and again, Wednesday, the answer was yes, yes, yes. Every single vote came down that basically said Synod intends to stay the course of 2022. There was a lot of question as to whether or not the numbers of votes should be read. The executive decided to not read those numbers, or at least not read those numbers regularly. There were some technical issues involved. There were other issues involved. I didn't know exactly what the motivation of the executive was for that. Perhaps they didn't want to stoke more conflict. In the end, there were a lot of progressive voices that pleaded for this. One particular rather moving speech on the floor of someone saying, if I'm a significant minority in this denomination with respect to this belief, I want to know how significant. And with that appeal, some more numbers were given, but they weren't given consistently. So, but it appears that the denominational split continues to be about 70-30 with respect to the traditional position versus the progressive position on human sexuality. In fact, overall the numbers are probably greater. When a survey was done and reported in 2016, about 14% of CRC clergy lean towards an affirming position. Now, there's lots of gradients in that. So, but overall, for the most part, it seems in these last couple of years, the percentages have sort of been 70-30. That's the numbers people are talking. Whether it's accurate, it's hard to tell, but that seems about right. So a solid majority of the church wants to stick with the position that it's held with respect to these issues since 1973. So the plan was Thursday, the appeal of Kneeland Avenue, who was, in a sense, a committee was named in Synod 2022 to basically go to that church and say, it's your job to rescind your decisions and recant your position and become in line with the rest of the denomination with respect to this. And the classis that has supervision of Kneeland Avenue was told, it's your job to bring Kneeland Avenue in line. And obviously there was an implied threat and all of that if you don't do so, discipline will follow. And there were recommendations, majority recommendations at the Synod of basically establishing another committee to go back and tell them, unless you come into line by the end of the calendar year 2023, you will not be able to seat delegates at Synod. And another committee would be named to follow up. That was being debated, and for the most part, most of the speeches by the people that you saw taking the positions that they did during the Synod were made. Part of what you saw during this synod was that for the most part, if you only watched the synod, you would imagine that most of the denomination must be progressive on this, because most of the speakers that you heard were making appeals from that side. That often happens in a deliberative body because those are the individuals that, in a sense, know they have to make their case. Even in, let's say, the California legislature, you'll often hear a lot of big speeches given by Republicans, and the Democrats are silent because the Democrats have a supermajority, and so the Republicans can speak all they want, but in the end, they have the votes. And so that's often what you see in a deliberative body that is divided the way this one is. Also coming up on Thursday would be the Gravamen issue. And the Gravamen issue has to deal with the actual mechanism by which officers who disagree with the confessional standards of the church can process their disagreement. There are, somebody on Twitter pointed out that the church order says there are at least two kinds of Gravamen. One of them is a confessional revision Gravamen, where you can basically say that you believe that the confessions disagree with the Bible and you want to make your case. Harry Bohr tried that significantly in the 70s and 80s, and in some ways it led to the system we have today. I really haven't made a definitive video on that. That's a really important issue that I am going to continue to make videos on, at least some that are this way with respect to the Christian Reformed Church, because it's a big deal. The second kind of Gravamen is to file a confessional difficulty Gravamen, which was a little bit ambiguous. Basically what it said was that if you have difficulty with some particular aspect of the doctrines of the church, you could file this with your local council. And basically, as long as you promise not to teach or preach or advocate for your position, you can continue to serve as an office bearer in the Christian Reformed Church. In other words, you basically keep your dissent private, or at least you only process it in appropriate spaces. Now, a lot of what happened Wednesday, when Synod continued to simply push home the point that the traditional view of marriage is the official teaching of the church, this is confessional, clergy and office bearers have to maintain this. A lot of the speeches given by those who disagreed with this, how can I say this? In theory, it might be as tight as they wanted to portray. In practice, it seldom is. And I think we'll probably have to talk about that more in subsequent videos. But basically, there was a lot of people saying, well, if you pass these kinds of things, then there's going to be a witch hunt or a harrowing or a purging. And there very well might be some of that in some classes. But these are the kinds of things that people are fearing and are worried about. So the Gravamen question is really a big question in that. And Committee 8, whose reports dominated the procedures on Thursday, tried to clarify that. They had a majority report and a minority report. Some on CRC Voices believe that the majority report was a little too strict and the minority report was a little too lax. The difficulty that everyone was facing was that Synod had a deadline of 3 p.m. on Thursday for concluding their business. And when you have something this consequential, and especially something that's potentially this nuanced, there's a lot of anxiety as to whether or not Synod will make a mistake. Now, even if Synod would have made a mistake in someone's opinion, generally speaking, 1 year would be enough to, let's say, bring it up again and try to correct the mistake. So, again, I often hear a lot of breathless drama on the Synod floor about bad things that are going to happen if we do this, do that. Generally speaking, as it works out in the church, it's usually a lot looser, not quite so bad. So Okay, but that's part of political speech. And so that was supposed to be Thursday. And like I said, things really started to unravel on Thursday, and the videos are on the internet, and if you want to watch it, you can. One of the things that surprised me is how many of you who have no connection to the Christian Reformed Church besides me have been watching these videos and sending me your sympathies, your prayers, your thoughts. And a number have said basically, well, these are the same kinds of things that are going through a lot of other churches. Either the church has been going through them or they are going through them now. And so in that way, it was sort of helpful to watch, at least through the Christian Reformed Church, kind of a proxy of them. And so I can understand the interest in it. Well, I should probably talk a little bit more about the decision. So basically what happened with respect to Kneeland is that no definitive discipline was laid down. And the way that debate went will probably ring in a lot of people's memories too. I'll see if I can clip the video in. I don't have the usual setup that I have in my office. Paul DeVries relinquished the chair because he was also on the in loco committee, and he spoke against the motion, which was his right to do. It was his right to report as a delegate, not as president. The vice president had the chair, and he gave a speech against the motion. And it was, a lot of people thought that the speech moved the vote and swayed the vote. And so there was no formal discipline against Kneeland Ave and Grand Rapids East. Now that obviously is going to be controversial. Some people cheer. Some people claim that it's a de facto local option. Others say it's a year of waiting. Others say he's giving the progressives a chance to leave on their own volition before next year's synod, which will likely, in fact, bring formal discipline, the kinds of motions that were in the Committee 8 advisory group. Some say it's basically letting Grand Rapids off the hook and they can do what they want. So right now it's in the court of public opinion and it's all over the map. And some people complain that Paul DeVries gave himself a lot of, gave himself a lot of credibility by being the chair for most of the meeting, and maybe some delegates who are new, usually about half delegates there are first-time delegates, maybe didn't understand, and so this would be, there's a million different opinions about this. And so that's part of the debate that is raging.
Paul, David, and then Daniel from Ontario Southwest.
Paul DeVries from Classis Thornapple, and just full disclosure, I was on the in local committee. I speak against this motion. This is a mistake, my friends. It lacks wisdom. A is enough. I agree with my brother Mike. A is enough. B is in fact punitive. You think the job of the first in local committee was difficult and limited in its mandate. I don't know how you read this other than it's punitive. The only advantage of B, if you could call it that, is that it provides a step-by-step process, which the in local committee will have to follow if we pass this, because they have to follow their mandate. It spells out exactly what they need to do, and it is clearly punitive. The goal is, it seems to me, to remove the church. I served on the first in local committee. That's what the result of this will be. We will remove them. Classis East, Kneeland, is only learning today. They had the right to appeal. They're only learning today, hours ago, that was not sustained. And now we're going to go ahead and outline the procedure for removing them. It's a mistake. I speak against it and would encourage others to vote against this. A is enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there was no formal discipline for Neyland or Grand Rapids East, and they will have their delegates next year. And so as the Gravamen question was, at the end of the day, tried to be taken up, there was very little time to do so. And as the clock was winding down, the vice president still had the chair, and he made a motion to the majority committee. The majority report was put to the floor, and I'll have to go back and look at the video again. But basically it looked like the majority report might be passed, and a lot of people feared that, and there was kind of an uproar in the stands. Some of the delegates announced that they were leaving in protest, and there were a number of those. One delegate, David Struck, the father of Ryan Struck, who wrote a piece in the Reform Journal that I mentioned in an earlier video. He had left earlier in the day in protest, and the Banner had taken up that article. And so then there was a lot of chaos on the floor, and then Paul DeVries announced to the floor that the officers had talked about the contingency that if in fact they ran out of time, that they would take these Gravamen recommendations from Committee 8 and defer them to Synod next year. And, well, that it happened so fast that tended to please no one. Or maybe some people. It's really hard to know. At that point, there was a fair amount of chaos that you could even just hear on the video, and it was a mess. So then they just announced that, then I'll have to go back and watch the video. They had some motion, so okay, all that was deferred to the next year. And, remember early on the perfunctory thing on Saturday of electing all of those people to boards that was postponed until after Committee 8? Well, they've still got to do that election or those boards don't have their people. And remember how on the first day they promised that if people had objections to individuals, that Synod would go into executive session in order to treat those objections? Well, there isn't any time for executive session, so it's a yes or no vote, which probably in many of those just simply means a yes vote. So they worked through the ballot and closed Synod. Wow. A very consequential Synod, a lot of drama, didn't end happily, and like I said, if Wednesday was a funeral, Thursday was the fight during or after the funeral. I noted that evening Hank had tried to call me a few times. He probably wanted to know if I wanted in on this chat. Mo, who is obviously someone that you all know from the corner, he's a CRC church planter in Chicago. And Jacob, like many of the people on this slide, you will recognize Lance, Hank. They talked about Synod, and they chewed on it from a whole variety of positions. Political position. Was there a filibuster? Did Paul DeVries do a good job? Did Paul DeVries do a good job in terms of time management? Did Paul DeVries do the right thing by, in some ways, even being Synod president when he had so many other conflicting things, such as also being in local committees? That conflicting, you could debate that either way. Did the progressives basically effectively filibuster? Did they, in fact, tie up so much time with arguing for votes that never would have passed? But is that just a function of, well, having been heard and the necessity of hearing, this stuff is going to be chewed on and debated, and this is going to go back and forth all year long. Lots of questions. Basically, it was suggested that Neyland can again file another appeal. Can they file appeals indefinitely to Synod and thus avoid any kind of accountability? I talked in the last video about accountability, hard and soft. Will conservatives leave because they're angry and frustrated? Will progressives leave because now finally they know that they are a minority in this position, and maybe they'll realize that they're not going to, their piece of the pie will likely continue to shrink, which is a thesis that I've been stating in a number of my videos, and I think Synod 2023 bears that out. Will this be another year of turmoil? There we are, and that's the aftermath. I was quite surprised by Laura Smith, who I don't know if she still teaches at Calvin. She was for a while. She was a year or two ahead of me at seminary. She was part of the development of the, the name, is it ECHO? A split off from the PCUSA. She had the comment, after the mess at the end of CRC Synod, found this commentary very refreshing. Loved weaponized confessions, something which anyone in this little corner familiar with a lot of our language knows this is a pretty common term, thanks to Jonathan Peugeot and Jordan Peterson. Weaponized confessions, since that's also what I saw, and not just from women, a lot of weeping men too. For your information, I'm an ordained woman, but also confessionally Orthodox and an INTP. Laura wrote that on Twitter, which, given her history with the Christian Reformed Church, I think was a rather interesting and important statement on Twitter. And immediately some people sort of took up the debate on Twitter, but that is, of course, Twitter. I've got a number of CRC ministers that are lining up to talk to me by the time when I get back to Sacramento, and in a more regular work schedule, I'm going to talk to a delegate tonight. I'm going to probably have some delegates on the channel talk about their impressions of what happened at Synod. If people thought Synod 2022 was an anomaly, no. Synod 2023 maintained the course of Synod 2022, and the drama continues. So, yeah, that's an initial report. There'll be a lot more to talk about. There are a lot of opinions out there. You can find the Just Chatting on the Randos United channel, where these guys chew on it some. There's a lot of chewing going on CRC Voices about it, and this will continue. I personally am happy that we're going to have another year to work on the Gravamen issue. This is a really important issue and something that's important to get right. And I think what we need from this Gravamen process is a way to, I've got a lot of thoughts about that, and I'm sure I might even be moved this year to try my hand at writing an overture, because this is a pretty important thing, because it has to do with not only the formation of clergy, who are obviously instrumental in the formation of the church, but also the ongoing formation of clergy. There was one speech given, and again, once I have all of my regular equipment, I'll probably do more with this. One speech given by a delegate who talked about the fact that in seminary he was in the affirming camp. At college and seminary, after college, he went more to the traditional camp and talked about the fact that clergy need time to continue to weigh these issues, and there will be migration with respect to these issues. And I think it's in fact the kind of process that I think the Christian Reformed Church needs to learn to build into its systems, while at the same time having confessional integrity. So the Christian Reformed Church is having a whopping confessional conversation right now. I'd like to see the Christian Reformed Church do better at it, and to the degree that I can assist the Christian Reformed Church in having a better confessional conversation, that is my goal. I hope these videos are a part of having a better confessional conversation. So that's kind of what I can do today. This will probably be the last video I record here in Santa Cruz. The house is going to fill up, and I'm going to lose this little bedroom in this Airbnb that I've remodeled as something of a recording studio. And I'll have my family coming in here, and we will celebrate the graduation from college of my youngest son. And very much looking for my kids and their significant others coming in, and we're going to have a great weekend. I am driving back to Livingstone's on Sunday morning to be able to preach there on Sunday, and then probably driving back here on Sunday evening and having one more fun night of family fun here in Santa Cruz. It's a beautiful place. And then Monday, I might, if Tim Blackman is speaking up in Mount Hermon, I might be able to shoot up and talk to him. He was a delegate at Synod and an old friend, and so I'd like to have him on the channel sometime. He's got a lot of stories to tell, and he's now in a new church, and so he's settled in, and so yeah, I'd like to. There's a lot of people I'd like to bring into the corner and into the conversation, and so thank you for all of the notes that you sent me because of the last video, and continue to pray for the Christian Reformed Church, and I will pray for your denominations that are going through similar things, and whatever side of these issues you're on, I hope that we can all learn and grow together and do so in a way that pleases God and in a way that both pursues unity and truth and brings healing to the nations. So that's my goal. And leave a comment. Let me know what you think.